It's not a loop, it's a spiral. Do you want to introduce the podcast now?
Yes, this is the Citizen Game Podcast, where you talk about games, trying to be movies, still trying to be TV, kinda, with this one. And I'm George, and I'm with my dear friend Ryan, and we're finally talking about a game that I think I don't want to speak for you, but we're both pretty psyched about.
I think it's really good.
It's just fun. It's just like, when I say fun, I don't just mean the gameplay. Every aspect of this game is just exciting and fun. And for reasons that, if you know anything about the game, you could probably guess why we got so much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, it's really good. Because it's interesting because I played Alan Wake 1 and we decided to do it for the podcast because Alan Wake 2 is about to come out. And I really wanted to play that because I had heard good things from people.
I think what sold me on it was someone had just tweeted out a video of some of the visuals, like when you're walking between realities, where it kind of has like video going over like Saga walk, or even just like switching the environments, the fast switching when you're like changing, when Alan Wake's writing,
He's
and
rewriting,
switches. Yeah, the way it, like the trippy visuals and how it switched the scenery, and just all the stuff where it's still one of the few games that actually justifies like fancy new gaming hardware.
Because the game looks gorgeous.
Oh yeah, it is technologically pushing boundaries, but I just finished editing our Alan Wake 1 episode and talking about the light switch room, and it's that thing where it's you have just crazy good all the technical aspects, the ray tracing, the high fidelity characters and everything, but some real amazing art direction to go with it.
Yeah.
So it's stunning in not just the technical aspects, but all the art direction and all this fucking juice is being put towards something that's actually artistically interesting versus Star Wars Outlaws, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, because it's like, I feel like there's a real vision behind it and an aesthetic it's going for, as opposed to like even something like Red Dead Redemption 2, which has an aesthetic, but is definitely more of like just trying to be like as realist as possible.
Yeah, and that's always been kind of what the Rockstar's thing for a while now. But this game, I think even some of the people who didn't jive with it as much, like Zero Punctuation off the top of my head, is like, hey, but you know what? This feels like it was made by a person. Like someone with a voice was behind this. There's actual creative decisions being made that, like, oh, this is a distinctive Remedy / Sam Lake experience.
Yeah.
But because I do want to talk about just the general flow of this game without getting into specifics, but I do want to just kind of start with the intro, because it really feels like a statement compared to the first game. Because the intro, we talked about the first Alan Wake, clumsy, kind of the super obvious tutorials. It feels like it was kind of just thrown in there,
and the narration is kind of weak.
Yeah, and probably the narration. The references are way toned, or the explicit references like that are way toned down. So you start off with back to the beginning and something kind of, talking about horror fiction, but it's just better. The way it's kind of the same idea as the first game, but you don't have this clumsy thing with like Stephen King this. And then it's also incredibly fucking violent. And yeah, he plays Nightingale, who's
That's
naked.
very good.
Yeah,
Because this is the first time, because Nightingale, vanishes he's possessed at the end of the first game.
yeah, he basically gets swept away, by the
Yeah, and then we
darkness.
see him at the end in the ending montage, and he's possessed. And that's it. So having it open with you as a completely naked Agent Nightingale, which is also very funny.
Already looking like a corpse, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you are basically a corpse.
And you get taken by some masked figures, and your fucking heart gets cut out, and it just feels like I think even in an interview, Sam Lake this is the darkest version that we ended up making of like all the possible versions we thought about kind of of Alan Wake 2 that could have been made. This ended up being kind of one of the darker versions that we made. And it's kind of awesome.
There's a prevailing sense of hopelessness in the game, especially in the
Yeah.
sections where you play as Alan.
Yeah, and oh man, there's so much to fucking get into, but yeah, I like that. I love feeling hopeless. It's great.
Yeah.
Uh but so just to get back with I do want to talk about some of the kind of core gameplay loop stuff, which kind of ties into more of the intro. Because you have that minimally interactive but still kind of gets your attention intro. But then it starts off pretty slow pace. You got to go to a murder scene. There's not. It is truly a horror game, as in it's going to be a while till you actually shoot something.
It's also in that way. I've brought this up a few times in the podcast, but much more cinematic in its pacing. Of having an opening where something dramatic happens, and then a long time where there's no action. We're just establishing the world, the characters, the core conflict. And it's not until the end of that mission when Nightingale gets off the table, which is one of the best scenes in the game, I think.
And it's like, I think we're just in an era where games aren't afraid to do that anymore.
Yeah, because Alan Wake 2 had a similar opening, but had the problem where the opening had to be this explain what the core gameplay is, give us a tutorial, to like almost like they're trying to let the player know, like, oh, this isn't a walking around talking to people game. Don't worry. This is a game where you shoot people and you shine flashlights on them and then you kill them. This game feels more confident in getting rid of that stuff.
And I think part of it is just kind of the times. Like, I don't, say what you will about Last of Us Part 2, but that game, of course, sold well. And according to the achievements, like 70% of people who played it finished it, which is kind of a crazy number for a 20-hour game. So I think, yeah, lots of game devs are just, they know that you're not going to, people want this experience and they're not going to be scared away from it.
There's also the advantage it has of being Alan Wake 2.
Absolutely.
So that like you make this game and there are people that have been waiting 13 years for it, who like want it. And so you're less worried about scaring people off.
It is less of an action game, and we brought this up with Alan Wake 1. So, I mean, part of the loop is some mild detective work. And let me start off with that. How did you feel about the Mind Palace kind of relatively simple detective work aspects of this game?
Yeah. So I had actually recently played a game called Conway Disappearance at Dahlia View.
I've never heard of this.
So that it is also a detective game where you finish it by putting you go around gathering clues and then you put things on a board to eliminate suspects and solve a mystery. But that's like the core gameplay. It's basically like a point and click adventure game where you're solving a murder or a disappearance.
Oh yeah, I just looked it up now. I haven't heard of this, but
and so that was in the front of my mind while I was in the Mind Palace sequences. And they work similarly, but the Mind Palace in this game, you could criticize it, that you can solve it by trial and error, basically, because you have the clues and you need to put them on the right things on the board. So it is possible to just brute force your way through it without actually understanding the mystery.
The thing is that's kind of the level. I definitely think you can criticize it, but at the same time, personally, that's kind of the level of detective work that I would want from something that is also a third-person shooter. If you're balancing those two elements, then and honestly, it's kind of in some ways it's more about. Some of it is more just kind of exposition and character work, kind of squeezed in there that you can experience at your own pace. Like when Saga's just, basically shining some people, like reading their thoughts and stuff.
That's a bit different from the core, because that's a different mechanic theoretically than the detective.
I know, but the detective board it also feels, it also just gives a chance to kind of go do some more story heavy stuff. Listen, it's more, I felt like I was more engaged with it than LA Noire, and that game is supposed to be exclusively a detective game that has some like weird mild shooting elements. So for something like this, where it's also survival horror, I thought it was fine. I was very happy with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't actually have that complaint that it's too linear or too easy to brute force, because I do find it interesting. And you're right, it is attached to something that is fundamentally, well, sort of. Like the Alan Wake sections are much more old school survival horror.
I would say his writer's room is kind of stronger because the puzzles interface with the world.
Yes, definitely. Like when you solve something in Saga's room, yeah, it doesn't really affect. Whereas, like, it's so cool, not just the interface of the world, but that there's like a sub narrative building in them. Like as you construct the novel that he's writing, I really love that the novel is coherent and like you can understand this Alex Casey book, and it makes sense. In addition to like serving a function in Alan's story.
There's something special about how do I put this? Like physical space. I was just thinking about this where she says, "Oh, this is my version of the Mind Palace technique." Where as far as I know, that's from oh my god.
BBC Sherlock. BBC Sherlock.
Fucking Sherlock. Yeah.
BBC Sherlock.
I know. Okay, hey, this is a complete side tangent, but I watched that terrible Republican movie, Lady Ballers, and they did the text thing where the text is on the screen. I'm like, wow, that. I guess the technique, because that was first done in Sherlock.
It's probably first done. It was first popped. That's the first time I saw it. Maybe someone else did it first, but yeah, that's where they're getting it.
It's just like, man, this has reached complete saturation. Now it's in your shitty Daily Wire movie. but anyways, fucking physical space. Like when you're already doing something weird and abstract, video games are really good at physical space. Do you understand what I mean when I say that?
Yes.
It's like, especially when you are depicting like the Mind Palace technique. I thought it was, when I watched Sherlock when I was a kid, I'm like, that's fun, but there's something special about it being a space that you can walk around in a game.
It's a literal mind palace you can go into. And it has it has like it's also, in addition to being that, it's also a unique way to have it's basically the menu.
Oh,
There's a
right,
bunch of
yeah.
things that in a normal game or normally in a game would be on the pause menu that it finds, and you can actually, if you interact with them, just flip through them like a menu. But it's so cool that the elements of the pause menu are also physical things you can walk to. I
Yeah, I
think that's a
really
really
like that.
interesting way of playing with like a core game design assumption.
Like, remember when I was like stroking the fuck out because I was trying to say, oh, like when you turn around in Star Wars Jedi Survivor with the other one, it's like, oh, you realize you're in a dream. And I was like trying to say it was abstract or it wasn't abstract or whatever. But like my point being is you have this great uh when you're a fake physical space that is nevertheless rendered in complete detail that you can understand as a real space. And since that's kind of the whole gimmick of Alan's sections of this place that completely takes place supernaturally and in his head, nevertheless rendered out in explicit detail that can be changed and swapped on the fly. That's special. That's really special. And I would say definitely using something unique to the medium.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think you're right that if this were like a film, the space of the dark place would feel very different. Because knowing that like it is physical, it is possible to go. I don't know how to put this into words, but I think you did a better job than I did, right? But it doesn't feel random because we know it's a persistent thing that always exists.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean that's what I'm trying to fucking get across. So the getting to like the actual when you have to shoot bad guys, how did you feel about that?
I think the shooting doesn't feel great, but I think this is a weak defense, but I think that's the point.
I don't think it's the point, but I think it's fine.
Yeah, the shooting is a bit the controls are kind of clunky sometimes, especially with Alan, I felt. Like all the times when I would be panicking because like a shadow monster is coming at me.
Yeah.
I'd be trying to aim the shotgun. It does do an interesting thing because you played this on mouse and keyboard, right?
No, I played on controller. I plugged in a
Oh, okay.
controller.
Because it does a weird thing with when you use the shotgun, it does a weird thing with the PS5 controller.
Oh yeah, any of that fancy PS5. I just played with like an Xbox
Right. So
controller,
on the
so I did
PS5
not.
controller, it does a weird thing where it makes the trigger weight higher.
Yeah, I heard
Like when
about
you
the
use the shotgun, it
feedback
makes
thing.
yeah. When you use specifically the shotgun, it makes it have a harder trigger pull,
That
like a
kind of
real
kicks
double barrel
ass.
shotgun has.
That does
Which
kind of
is
kick
interesting.
ass.
It does create a very tactile relationship with the weapons, which I like a lot, but it does kind of make them annoying to use. Because
I
like
just
that's not what I don't expect that in a video game. Like in a video game, I expect to be able to pull the trigger and it
yeah,
just be a
yeah.
button I press. But treating it like it's a physical trigger is interesting.
I I guess I kind of want to come to the defense of the combat at least a bit because I have noticed consistently, even people who enjoyed the game, some people have called the combat outright bad, and I don't agree with that. Um, it's not. I guess basically because especially a lot of survival horror games and a lot of classic survival, especially like the Resident Evil 2, like that, or like 90s and shit, where it's not even about aiming, it's just about avoiding guys and juggling your ammo count. Um, so judging it just on that, I was like, I felt squeezed. There were times I ran out of bullets.
Oh, definitely. I think the inventory management stuff works really well.
I even like I really did not pick up a lot of the weapons that you can pick up, and I liked that the game let me miss those and
What
make
weapons did you not pick up?
I didn't get a crossbow.
Mm.
I never got like the pump action shotgun for
Uh,
Saga.
did you get the
Um,
rifle for Saga?
I did not get I literally for Saga only had the double barrel and the pistol.
That's interesting. So
Um,
I got the pump action and I got the crossbow, but I never found the rifle. I still don't know where it is. But one moment with this that I thought was really good was I found the double barrel shotgun as Allen, and my inventory was full. So I just had to drop stuff I didn't want to drop. So
I
yeah, and
like
that's like a good moment.
I like that the fact that I missed these guns and like no you if you miss the guns you don't get them. I like that the
Yeah,
game was punishing me for not being thorough.
yeah, that it really rewards exploration in a way that it honestly is kind of similar to both of the Last of Us games, especially two, where you can also I think miss guns.
Yeah.
I think it's like possible to never get a shotgun as Ellie in two.
But even those are more telegraphed than these ones are.
Yeah, but this is just because those are you do one of the missions, like the side activities in the open world section, and you get the gun. This is like
Right.
you go to a space where you have to do something, and then you have to stop doing it and go off and find the code to this gun safe. But you have to actively like it's a diversion from the quest you're there to do. It's not a quest reward.
I think people because around the same time the Resident Evil 4 remake came out. And it's like, no, it obviously like because that game, as far I never played it. I played the original Resident Evil 4, one of the great action games. Um no, this combat does not hold up to most of like the action focused Resident Evil games. But I think it was like Donkey that said it's like no, the combat is not as good as Resident Evil 4, but Resident Evil 4 doesn't have a doesn't have a musical number. And I think at this point um in my life, like I've seen lots of really elegant combat systems, but a so-so survival horror element with everything else that this game is doing, that's going to be way more exciting to me than a Resident Evil 4 remake, even if it has way better combat, you know? And this game
Yeah,
had enough of that. It did what a survival horror game is supposed to do, which is think about your ammo count, explore. The only complaint I would have is that I do wish there was some sort of effective like melee because you could shoot them in the head sometimes that would stun them and and like some of the games you can like Resident Evil, you can like roundhouse kick. You can go up and punch guys, and that is a way you can actually save ammo, which I found out. But it feels bad, and you
I
don't really want to
think
do
yeah, I
it.
think having an effective melee would mess up the feeling the combat's trying to give you, especially when
Yeah.
you're fighting like normal enemies or the shadow monsters or whatever. It's like I don't want them to come near me. I want them to get away
Okay.
from me.
Um. Signalis, which is a very Silent Hill, Resident Evil inspired game, has a shove. It's not like damaging. I almost kind of wish this game had some sort of like shove, but very small, very nitpicky thing. I think this combat would just like the detective stuff. I think all the interactive elements work well with the overall presentation and feeling that it all works cohesively for me.
Okay, I agree. Do you want to talk about the non-interactive stuff? I guess the story. Um,
Yeah, and God,
because
I don't even know how to get a handle on this.
I think I
Um,
can do it. I think I can do it.
okay,
So
okay,
you start out playing as Saga Anderson, who's a FBI agent. She comes to Bright Falls because they found Nightingale with his heart cut out, and then it's a very it's very true detective and also like Silence of the Lambs.
can you
No, 'cause
elaborate on the True Detective stuff since I haven't seen that?
the partner dynamic. It's not like the
Okay,
True Detective partner dynamic, but like introducing the two partners at the same time and their dynamic being super core to the story is very much like True Detective, especially season 1 of True Detective.
A great moment to also just bring up that this game has fun cinematography.
Yeah.
The joke of the parallel like shot of them side by side drinking coffee
In the opening credits, yeah.
And then it continues throughout the game. Like it's a good
Visual
gag. But there's tons of interesting ways that this digital game, this digital reality is like shot. Like, I think we were talking about like the God of War. Like, I don't know about God of War's one camera thing. Like, it's kind of distinctive, but I felt that the actual cinematography of this game was a lot more compelling than a lot of the other prestige games I've seen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it looks just good. And so we should mention that her Saga's partner is Alex Casey, who is the character. So in the first game, Alan Wake is a crime fiction writer who's famous for writing a series of novels about Alex Casey. And we get a sample of those novels in the first game. And it's clearly about Max Payne. Like the way the narration is written is the voice that Max Payne narrates in.
Yes.
And it's basically describing Max Payne's death, which is interesting. And then I mentioned I was playing Control. In the DLC in Control, you actually find a document about the fact there's an FBI agent whose actual name is Alex Casey. So they were planning this when they made that DLC in Control. So here you have Alex Casey, who is voiced by Max Payne's voice actor and modeled by Sam Lake, just like Max Payne in the original game.
And James McCaffrey.
Plays and voices him, and he is aware that there is a series of novels about a detective named Alex Casey, and for that reason, somewhat dislikes Alan Wake. But it's not clear what the causal relationship between the existence of the fake Alex Casey and the real Alex Casey is. Like, it's not clear because there's all this psychic stuff and like rewriting reality. It isn't clear if like he's created by the book or if somehow Alan Wake became aware that there was a real dude named Alex Casey who was going to become a detective and wrote that.
And that causality is like for everything is left open.
Yeah.
Which is very fun.
Well, there's some things where the causality of fiction affecting reality is explicit, like with Saga's daughter.
Right.
Where she has a daughter who's alive, and then because she's a hero detective, she must have a dark backstory. And therefore, her daughter must have died. So it becomes written into the story that her daughter, who is alive, actually died years ago.
Do you get the sense that if this game was written by a lesser person, it would feel up its own ass?
Definitely.
And it's hard to describe why it doesn't. I mean, part of it, I think we were talking about this earlier, but Max Payne 2, famously, Max Payne 1 is Sam Lake's face.
Mm-hmm.
And Max Payne 2 is not. As soon as they got a better budget, they got like a real model and everything. And I feel like you can, maybe this is too much conjecture, but it seems like Sam Lake does not have like an ego on him for that sort of decision. But there's an understanding that this is just fun and funny with his face showing. It doesn't at all feel like an ego thing for the writer to put his own fucking face in the game. It doesn't feel like
it's really fun.
Yeah. Oh, wait, that's a great. So I haven't fucking seen Lady in the Water, but I feel like if I did, I would probably have some like really obvious comparisons to make from what I understand about that movie.
Yes, I've also not seen Lady in the Water, but I get what
Yeah,
you're
maybe
referencing.
we should watch that.
No, I've never been
No, just
encouraged to.
no.
I mean, I only have so many hours in my life. Uh, but I agree with you that this would feel like jerk off bullshit. If I don't know if it wasn't so much fun, like if it
That's
was
how
because it
if
doesn't
someone
feel
described it.
it doesn't feel like it's like trying to say something necessarily super profound here. It's just like having little fun with metafiction.
It feels like we're here to have a good time. And like it even because I kind of want to ask you at some point, what do you think this game is trying to say? But whatever it is trying to say, it doesn't feel like it's wrapped up in somebody's ego. Even though the fucking game is kind of about a writer's ego in a certain sense, it does not feel. Someone put it. I saw like a post where it's just like all this self-insert stuff and putting Sam Lake. It seems to just show off how much of like a fun goofball he is, and like having him do dancing scenes and all these little things. It just comes across as the game's trying to make you smile and not trying to, yeah, jerk off in your face, to put it crudely.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel masturbatory. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it doesn't. Like I can't like quite explain why, but it doesn't. And the other, so you have that storyline that you're going through. And then after, Nightingale gets off the table, he's a monster, he comes after you. Or I don't remember when exactly do you make the first switch to playing as Alan?
I think it's after.
Is it
Well,
after you fight Nightingale?
he comes, yeah, because he comes back, and then you talk to him for a bit, and I think that's when you switch over.
You talk to who?
Like you talk to Alan Wake, like you have
Oh
that
yeah, yeah. After because you get
interview.
that after you fight the bosses, you get that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then so there's an interesting thing with the game where you can not play the missions in any order, I guess, but there's a point where you can play because then you cut over into the dark place with Alan, where he's in like an evil version of New York City, basically, or you might call it Noir York City.
right.
They're still riffing on that one line from Max Payne 1,
It's great.
weirdly. Because they don't ever say it, but in my brain when I saw this, oh, this is Noir York City.
Yeah,
It's always
exactly.
raining and it's always night and it's lit by like neon, like Blade Runner type neon signs. It's basically Gotham City in the recent Batman movie.
Yeah, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, that's exactly the aesthetic they're going for. But you can play the saga missions or the saga levels and the Allen levels in any order theoretically, because I
Which
think
I don't. There's a cutoff point, like
yes,
near the end,
there's a
but
cutoff point where if you get to a point in Saga's missions or Alan's missions, it'll say you have to finish the other person.
yeah, and I don't think I've played a game with this structure.
Yeah. So how did you play the levels?
I don't think I switched off evenly. I think I played a little bit more. I do like maybe two of Saga's, one of Alan's, then maybe one of like it was kind of sporadic. It was definitely like whatever I was feeling.
Yeah,
Um,
I was more systematized about it in that I just tried to alternate one, 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 one.
which I think they
But
could have just made you do that and no one would have
yeah,
complained. But it's
it seems
interesting
like
that they let
yeah,
you do that.
it seems like a more normal way to structure the game would have been forcing you. But it's interesting though because I have to imagine that if you played the game, because the way you do that, you keep them roughly the chronology gets confusing at certain points, but you keep them roughly chronological if you do that. Like they link when they meet in the threshold, it like links up, basically.
Right. Yeah.
But I have to imagine it'd be interesting to just do Saga, seeing Alan in the thresholds, and then just do Alan, or the reverse.
I think having her there and her sections there can maybe stop Alan's stuff from getting a little nauseating.
Yeah, because it's really stressful navigating the world which makes sense because it is the dark place. It is terrible. But playing as Alan always felt way more stressful because I never knew when something bad would happen. You know, like there were sections in Saga's storyline where I knew I wasn't about to get jumped by some monster.
Yeah,
And
you're just walking around the town a little bit for
you
one
never
part.
really get that as Alan because you're in the dark place all the time. So at any moment, a shadow monster could just attack you.
So they serve as really good like counterbalances to each other. I mean, I always go back to Yakuza 0 because you're switching off between two protagonists that don't actually interact that much, but that game you switch off, like the game makes you switch.
Oh,
Um,
another reason they would switch off without making you is because they're trying to make the chronology confusing. Because halfway through or about halfway through Saga's storyline, Alan shows up, or not halfway through, way earlier than that actually.
I know,
Alan
yeah, it's
shows up.
almost like the chaos that you can cause to the narrative by picking different things is just like an added benefit.
It's supposed to make you not understand because it's eventually revealed that it's just like he went back in time, like they are happening linearly, but it's meant to confuse you of like, oh, is the Alan stuff actually happening before the Saga stuff or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like the game would be more predictable if that choice wasn't there.
Yeah, because the
It's
choice
kind
means that you're never sure.
because even while I was playing it, just the thought of like, well, wait a second, can I just finish Saga's section? And that kind of calls into question of like, wait, what is Alan even doing right now? And maybe it's to kind of provoke those questions, or maybe they realized they could do it, that there wasn't anything in the story that wouldn't allow them to do it, and that's what pushed it. I don't know, but it's just interesting because, like I said, I can't recall a game that's had that sort of structure. I mean, except like, fuck, I don't know, like maybe some open world games where you got to do one thing and then do another, but that doesn't even that I don't even think that really counts.
Yeah, because that's just you having freedom to determine the story, more than like this is two like linear storylines. It's just the order you play them is what you're determining.
So, to kind of get more specific, because we were talking about the introduction of the saga, arriving at the crime scene, and there's a little moment where the policeman thinks that, oh, clearly Alex Casey is leading this case
Yeah.
because he's the man. And what I want to what I want to ask you is, Alan Wake 2 Alan Woke?
Is it Alan Woke?
Because yeah, so
Yes.
when I'm saying that, I mean there's a couple more specific things. You have I forget the actual line she says about like white men, but there seems to be
That's
kind
the
of this.
only time it comes up explicitly. Her
It comes up
race or
explicitly,
gender comes up
but
explicitly.
there seems to be kind of this theme of like her trying to take control of her own story.
Yes, from Alan Wake, who is a white dude, white male author. Um, well, speaking on that, there is an interesting thing. So she is the so she's mixed race. She's the granddaughter of the Anderson brothers from the first game, who are both
Right.
white dudes who run a like pagan metal band.
Yeah, yeah.
And her mother had some big falling out with Tor, who's her grandfather, right?
Right.
I don't think I'm crazy for thinking that uh, that falling out might have been caused because she married a black guy. Am I crazy for like reading that into it?
It just seems it seems like that explicitly would be so heavy.
It
Um
would be, but he's in a pagan metal band.
Yeah, but every other depiction of these guys is like they love their daughter and that they're just funny guys.
Tor is like explicitly his thing is like that he's so regretful about driving his daughter away.
Wait, hold on. So his daughter is
Saga's mother.
Saga's mother.
Yes.
Is white.
Yes, because I would assume.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. No,
so I assume Saga's father is black.
I know some people that like someone was theorizing that maybe Warland Dorr is her dad.
That's
not
just you see two black people in the game and you think
okay.
related.
So I was that was my first thought, but then he does have that line where he's like, "You're hurting someone close to me." But yeah, that could also just be
because it's also like the game makes pretty explicit that her having psychic powers comes from the Anderson side of her family.
Yeah,
because all of it turns out that the psychic stuff she does when their brains were a bit less senile, Tor and Odin could also do that.
But I guess so. But the answer is yes. Alan Wake 2 is Alan Woke, and that theme is there. And yes. I think that's kind of interesting.
The scene where Casey and I don't remember her name, the bureau office agent,
right,
who's a woman, where they both bitch about their ex-wives. It's very funny.
I could listen to James McCaffrey play a character bitching about his ex-wife all day.
It's very funny that like it's also like because I'm pretty sure they even say like the fictional Alex Casey has the same backstory as Max Payne, where his like wife was murdered, but like the real Alex Casey's just like I'm glad to be away from her. Yeah. He's like happy that he got divorced.
Which is like a great moment of like Alex Casey he is not Max Payne, despite all of the. I mean, oh my god, the book version of Alex Casey is kind of Max Payne,
right? Because I want to talk about that too. Because in addition to James McCaffrey and Sam Lake playing the real quote unquote real Alex Casey, they also show up as the book Alex Casey in what I think is the most fascinating thing the game does, which is the rewriting mechanic.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
Alan will, in order to get out of the dark place, he has to write a novel called. Is the novel he's writing Return, or did he already write Return in this? No.
Initiation, isn't it? Initiation then?
Right, he's writing Initiation and then Return, or did he already write Initiation? I don't even remember. It's really very confusing. Anyway, he's writing a new Alex Casey novel. He has to write a new Alex Casey novel to get out. And so he's writing it about Alex Casey hunting down a cult. And Alex Casey shows up at one point. He's how Alan gets the revolver because he dies.
Yeah.
And this Alex Casey is clearly even more Max Payne. He's like got the tortured film noir internal monologue, right?
I was like, oh my god, like just a fucking like home run, just chewing the fucking scenery. Like anytime you do the little focus puzzle where you get to see Alex Casey projected onto the scene, which gives you hints about how you need to change it, or lets you access different
you can access different scenes.
I think that specifically the hotel might be my favorite part of the game. Because everything, at least the Allen section, I think every element just comes together perfectly. And I mean, what's there to say? It's just like James McCaffrey. The dialogue. We bitched about Max Payne 3, obviously.
Yes.
And it's so clearly like this dialogue is in the right hands. This character is in the right hands. Like the shit that he spits out.
It's like it's got the poetry that you want good.
Yes.
That kind of style of narration to have that was totally missing in Max Payne 3, which was way too blunt and expositional. It's not having fun with the language and the poetry the way it is here. But yeah, it's so because like the mechanic is that right, Alan is in a room and he can rewrite what plot point he has in that room, and it will change the design of the room. And it's just interesting the way he can. It's like about constructing a plot.
Yeah,
And
because the
having to make it make
actual
sense.
puzzles of like the physical space doesn't get too convoluted or complicated, but
A lot of it is just what version of this has a door to exit?
tying that in to a narrative and everything, like this game truly is, this is what I want high budget single player prestige games to be.
Exactly.
Like give me one of the best looking games ever made, but also do something truly creative and tying in gameplay mechanics to story, and also doing things that other mediums can't, like manifesting imaginary places as reality in a way that just fundamentally works different because it's a game.
Or showing us the same space and then having us change it several times, giving us iterations of the same space, but not like it's like we're seeing scraps of a story. Because you could even I would, when I was doing the puzzles where you would have to pick plot points for rooms, I would always do the ones that I knew weren't the answer just because I wanted to see what they looked like.
Oh, yeah, I would cycle through them all.
Yeah, I wanted to see like if I did the massacre plot point in the hotel lobby instead of the murder game plot point, and I just wanted to see how it would change, even if I knew that wasn't the answer to the puzzle. Because
Yeah, it's
they put so much care into designing all the environment.
I yeah, I could gush on and on. I mean, all of Alan's sections have a little bit of that. But the hotel for me is where it really comes all together. And I've got nothing. And of course, while you're doing this, you're walking past creepy shadows that could attack you.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing in the game where you have most of them are not actually enemies, but just enough of them are that you're always scared. And because what I always want to do with them is hit the flashlight button, but that'll waste a battery charge. So it's always like a question of, do I let this thing get close enough to see if it's really an enemy, or do I just nuke it with the flashlight and risk wasting that?
And I like that as kind of a new take on a classic survival horror thing, where do I just try and walk past these guys, or do I just take them out to make my life easier? That's very like 90s survival horror, but this is kind of a different twist of, yeah, do I want to risk it, or do I just want to be sure that this thing isn't going to jump out at me? And that tension, just, it's a great way of maintaining tension, because they're always there, especially when you're out in that open world.
Yeah, when you're on the street, they're everywhere. And especially because they're whispering. Like
Yeah,
like they just say drowning or something, or Alan, right?
yeah,
They're
yeah.
always in my ear whispering to me when I go. And the ones that attack you whisper just like the ones that don't. So you never know if you hear something behind you, if that's an actual enemy or if it's just one of these shadows. It's so good. It's so effective.
Yeah, and truly, I would say innovative artistically and mechanically. So yeah, I love it. Um, all right, what's next?
What is next? I think this is an interesting
Oh wait, oh okay.
evolution.
Hold your thought. I just thought before we move on from this section.
Okay.
Um, just praising James McCaffrey and the writing of that part. I like his fourth wall break joke where he says, "I don't even know where to look to break the fourth wall."
Oh, because when they're in the stage.
Yeah, that I didn't even know. I didn't even know where to look to break the fourth wall, and it's just like, that's a banger. Um,
I thought I was in a
just,
computer game.
yeah, and I again, So I hate to bring up this comparison, but it's the last thing that's on my mind watching. I watched like the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, and I don't need to say anything. I don't like how that movie breaks the fourth wall and how Deadpool talks to the camera. I don't really think I need to get into specifics of why this works and is of a different class and is charming and elegant versus that movie. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. Let's talk about what you were gonna talk about.
I was going to talk about how I think it's an interesting evolution of like earlier Remedy concepts in earlier Remedy games. Because my head, with all this stuff about how the Alex Casey novel being written, it feels like an internally coherent story. I keep thinking about Address Unknown from Alan Wake 2, where you have that whole.
Wait, you mean Max Payne 2?
Sorry, Max Payne 2?
Yeah.
Where you have the whole Sam Lake, Alan Wake, Max Payne, and Alex Casey all blur together in my head. And the meta bullshit isn't helping. Okay? They're all mixed up.
Knowing about all of the other Remedy games like makes you feel more like Alan Wake in this game. Just getting everything confused. This game makes you feel schizophrenic.
Yeah, but no, I'm saying it because it's an evolution of concepts they've always been playing with, like in-universe fictional stuff. And even because I'm now playing Control, I did not realize the overlays are an idea from Control, where you would get the phone calls and you would see the director, also voiced by James McCaffrey.
I love the overlays because I assume that they're relatively cheap to do.
Yeah.
And I'm always a fan of that sort of money saving, but giving, it is a flashy technique that doesn't actually cost that much to do.
Yeah, but it's just like it feels like everything they do in this game feels like an evolution of stuff they've always done. I mean, even Max Payne 1, I almost said Alan Wake. Max Payne 1 had the little in-universe TV shows. Like the meta-fictional stuff has always been there.
Yeah, and it's so satisfying and fulfilling to track a through line through this, because it's something you get in films a lot easier, obviously. Like noticing director signatures and things like that. It's so much harder with games for like a billion reasons. And there's something satisfying recognizing the same creative voice and evolutions of techniques. It's just something you do not get to see as much in games.
Yeah, or if you have them in games, they're like, I feel like they're crass, or their attempts at like nostalgia baiting, which this never feels like.
No,
it never feels like we're doing this so that the fans will squee at how.
But that's funny because it's like I'm a fan and I'm squeeing, but it's the method and how they approach it that makes me squee, and not some fucking easy like you remember this kind of thing.
Yeah,
I am a fan and I'm squeeing.
It is the thinking man squee. It's a champagne sipping squee. I don't know. It's prestige.
Yes, but it's also just like all of Remedy's games, not afraid to be very silly. We didn't even talk about the musical scene, probably because there's not much to say except if you didn't know it was coming, it's truly just a joyous.
So yeah, I knew it was coming because I saw the music video. I did not realize how the music video would actually work in the game and the way it would be integrated.
That guy's literally pointing where you're supposed to go.
And like just seeing the music video happen on screens while you're fighting people, it's really interesting. It manages to one up the musical sequence in Alan Wake 1, which was already the best sequence in Alan Wake 1.
And truly, I like it is. It is also a summary of the first game.
Yeah, it's also a recap of both the backstory and the first game, which is interesting as
Oh,
a rock song.
and this game does not have previously on Alan Wake, probably because it'd be really difficult with the structure. But
Yeah.
it still has the kind of episode
Yeah, you have
structure.
the title screen flash while you're playing, which is I thought that was interesting too. That it's not during a cutscene; it just flashes on screen while playing. You notice that?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Getting back to like the way I'm talking about, like a lot of stuff I like, it's these moments and then the levels. But as far as the just the story, the plot beats and everything, and that it gets very, you need to get the clicker. That's kind of like in some ways that's a lot of what I can only recall in a lot of Saga stuff. Um, I don't even know where I'm going with it. Just like, well, let's get a little bit to the ending and just discussing the game as like a whole narrative. How
Right.
did
So
you just
you
feel
get
at the end of the, yeah?
um. So the ending you get is that they, Scratch and Wake are the same person. If Wake gets out, Scratch gets out, etc. And I could see coming that Alan was going to get out and then ultimately have to go back in. That's a pretty obviously signposted plot development, right?
Yeah, yes.
Especially with the whole thing of like, if the story becomes real, Saga's daughter is going to die. The actual ending, I mean, I don't really. It feels even more confusing than the ending to Alan Wake 1, which I honestly really respect. Because Alan Wake 1 is a cliffhanger that you wait like 14 years to get an answer to. And then ending the game where you get the answer with an even more confusing cliffhanger is pretty cool.
My question for you. So at times I felt like I was kind of missing the stakes of this story. During those moments where your goal was pretty abstract of you need to talk to this person, and I mean, especially like kind of the elements when you're building to on Saga's end with, we got to get a clicker and then play a fucking rock song and that will like summon Alan.
Yeah.
There were times where I was just like, okay, I don't really know what's happening right now at this moment.
I never had that feeling.
But my my point is, when I finished it, despite all the fun I had, I was kind of left with this question of like, what am I getting out of this game? And I want to ask you, what did you get out of this game?
What did I get out of it? Like, in what sense?
Yeah, because like thematically, uh, what is it trying to say, if you will? Because I feel like there's gestures, um, at creation and like the writing methods and or writer's block and
There's something about how narratives get constructed, like how I don't know. I can't come up with what it's trying to say. Like
when
about the real world, I don't know.
and of course you don't have to find something that the game is trying to, but it felt like it kept gesturing towards something that was like out of reach for me. I mean, the closest you get, I do think, is kind of that Alan Woke, of a black woman kind of taking back her own story and becoming a creative partner and working without, and that's kind of the solution. That's kind of the closest to something tangible like that. But it's so meta fictional and everything that I kind of struggled to grasp more of that stuff. But I mean, at least I I feel sane that we're at least somewhat on the same page there.
Yeah, I can't think of what it's necessarily trying to. It's something about creation, the creative work, and the way it affects people. The way the author fits people into narratives. I think that's probably the closest thing to a coherent message or theme, I guess. Because the way that Saga's life gets twisted into a narrative shape.
And Warland Orr says basically stop dicking around.
Yeah.
And there's kind of the implication that Alan is a piece of shit, you know?
Yeah. Because there's always that with him and Scratch being him.
Yeah, and I do like we didn't even mention, because as I said with first Alan Wake, yeah, points deducted for killing off for fridging the wife. I like that she really gets her moments in this game.
Yeah, with the puzzle rooms.
She gets the last word in this game too. After the credits and everything. And she even actually, I guess that kind of ties into she feels a little overshadowed by Alan. She has her own creative work that she wants to get out. And she doesn't really get to do that until after he dies, and she's got her own photo gallery, and I found that stuff really. Also, she calls out that Barry was really nice and supportive to her. You don't get to see Barry, but I was like, yay.
You hear? I think you hear him once in an interview about, or is this in? No, this. I'm sorry. This is in American Nightmare, where he like revives. He does like a revival tour for Old Gods of Asgard.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that.
But he's only mentioned.
You read an email from him.
Yes, and he's mentioned as having helped found the old folks' home that Tor and Odin live in now.
I'm just saying, he didn't make an appearance, but I'm glad that they were.
They're respectful to Barry.
I'm Barry's strongest soldier.
You're a Barry stan.
Hey, so I played.
You would have rioted if there was no reference to Barry.
I played the DLC packs for Alan Wake 1. So of course, yes, I really enjoyed the Barry boss fight.
Yes.
That was great. No, but yeah, there's definitely something there about kind of Alan Wake overshadowing other people's stories, and also with Alex Casey.
Right, because Casey, when he meets Wake, he's all pissed because it's like, my whole life compare me to Alex Casey. I don't even know who that is. Just a book.
It almost feels like this is definitely not at all part of the game, but it made me think of like kind of anti-true crime fiction stuff, that sort of thing. Not that Alan Wake writes it, but it just brought it to my mind at the very least.
Yeah, because I think true crime also does that thing of it needs to fit real life into a detective story.
Yeah, and I would try and dig into that more, but he does not write true crime. He writes
he explicitly writes crime fiction,
stories.
but there is a relationship between true crime and crime fiction.
That is true.
There's crime fiction often is imitating the tone of true crime,
and sometimes just straight up taking real stories.
Yeah, and fiction like Psycho famously is based on a highly inaccurate and fictionalized and inaccurate reporting about the Ed Gein case.
Right, yeah.
And so is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's actually a lot of fictional serial killers based on now confirmed false reporting about Ed Gein.
Oh, damn. I did not know that.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw is also about Ed Gein. Not about Ed Gein. It's also based on the Ed Gein case. Oh, and so is Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, well, yeah.
The main killer, I don't remember the name of the killer in Silence of the Lambs.
Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo Bill is also Ed Gein.
Yeah, that makes sense. I maybe part of it is because at least in the first game there was kind of this element, because it starts off with Alan Wake having writer's block. I definitely say there's a continuation of just the element of writing is hard, and writing is like shockingly restrictive when it comes to genre fulfillment and yeah, just getting it out. That kind of element from the first game is definitely continued on into this game. Because of course, there's lots of funny YouTube videos. It's like, or people posted, why isn't Alan Wake just ride himself on a yacht with some strippers?
Yeah, like they
Is he
explicitly explain
is
this.
he stupid?
Yeah, that's constant in this game is like this has to be a horror story. Like you can't pick the genre.
Other thing I want to bring up that's on Saga's side. I like when she's in her mind palace and she has that moment where she's kind of freaking out. And she is charting out why she's a bad mother on like the
Yeah.
case board. I thought that
Yeah.
was a really solid element.
It's a
Uh,
good, yeah. I mean, it's kind of cheesy a little, but it's a good representation of like that she's spiraling in like negative thoughts.
I think if you're using kind of physical space and tokens like that to represent someone's mental state, I thought that was pretty great because definitely, I mean, me personally, and other people I've talked to, it's kind of a classic like therapy thing or whatever. Like people are really good at reasoning why they're fuck ups and bad people.
Yeah. You
That's something
start
you can't.
finding all the things that have happened. Like, especially, I don't know if this is what's happening in the scene, but like dredging up evidence from the past.
Yes, when you're depressed and feel bad and everything, you're pretty good at like, yeah, and this is why I suck and I'm a piece of shit. I thought that was a
And
great
this thing
little
that happened
depiction.
6 years ago, and this thing I did when I was like 14 or whatever, you bring up all these memories that you thought you'd forgotten. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, it is. I guess you could call it a little cheesy, but I mean, it could have been way more. I mean, I've seen way more ham-fisted things in video games explicitly of trying to depict like a mental health crisis, like through um physical reality, whatever. Like I've seen that done very stupidly before, so I thought this was pretty good.
And it's not like because there's some games I don't want to, but like it's not like super focused on. I guess
No, it's just
it's like just
you
this
put it out
one.
there for crisis moment, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, it's her low point. It's her. It's her low point in Saga's story, so it's very fitting.
yeah.
There's not a whole lot that I have left to say about Alan Wake 2, but I did want to like touch on just a little bit of American Nightmare since I did play it. I don't know if you're ready for that yet.
I mean, I can talk about American Nightmare. What about it?
I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Except it is interesting that the game leaned further into action than the base game with like automatic weapons and stuff.
The actual sequel then leaned away from it.
But there were elements that felt like that were kind of testing things in Alan Wake 2, like the puzzle you have to solve of like, oh, you have to make sure the scene's right. There is an
Yes.
explicit section where you have to make sure the scene's right.
And the idea of going through the same areas but doing different things each time.
You're in a loop.
Yeah, it is a loot. Wow. And also, of course, I thought it was weird that when I played this game that Mr. Scratch is the main villain. So it's like, didn't I kill him already?
Yeah, which of course, like, what actually is American Nightmare supposed to
Yeah,
represent?
it's like because it's never. I mean, so Alan knows who Mr. Scratch is in this game, and we have to assume he knows that because he experienced the events of American Nightmare, right?
Yeah, I
Because he
mean, and I
already
guess
knows who Scratch is.
you can write it off as just, yeah, it's, Alan was, I mean, literally, he could have been trying to write an episode of Night Springs, like, as a side thing, like,
To get out, yeah, because
you could dream up any explanation you want for it, basically.
yeah, it's very weird, but I do like in that where you have. Did you? So there's interesting. So the woman who like tries to seduce you. Did you go back and save her on the third loop?
No, I did not.
Oh,
I
you
don't
you
think
fucked up. Well,
I was. Listen, I
right.
was not. I was like, oh, I'm almost done. Like, because
Yeah,
I was
so
powering through it on a weekend.
right. So you can go back to where she is and turn the lights on. And she even says, like, thanks for helping me. You didn't have to do that.
I mean, was that it, or is there
That's
anything
it. Yeah,
else?
it's just
Okay.
interesting. It's just
Oh, so
interesting that that's
you're
the.
just calling me a piece of shit, is what you're saying?
No, I think it's interesting that there's one you can miss because you save the other two characters as part of the story. But then it's like the last one you can potentially fuck up and leave her possessed.
Yeah, and I mean, other than the other elements, I would just attribute to this was just a style of expansion and DLC that was more popular back in the 2010s. Uh, it's very, very similar to Call of Juarez Gunslinger. Like they even kind of the art style is a little bit more like cell shaded and cartoony,
Mhm.
which that was what the Call of Juarez game and then also that Far Cry Blood Dragon.
A little, but not to the extent that that one does.
I'm talking like kind of mechanically, where it's like
Oh
this is
yeah,
going
I
to be
get it.
more arcadey
Oh yeah, it
experience.
definitely is. You have so many more types of
And
guns.
well, Blood Dragon riffing on like specific pop culture,
Yeah,
because that's that. I mean, they have fucking Michael Biehn as the voice of the main
yeah,
guy in the game. Uh, um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about it, but I mean, as far as that type of DLC, I thought it was, yeah, I mean, it's something you would have downloaded for your Xbox 360
yeah.
for
I,
20,
I,
20
I,
bucks.
I probably would have been disappointed if I'd been a big Alan Wake fan and then been like, "Wow, the second Alan Wake game," and then it was that.
Yeah,
Like, because
yeah.
I'm playing all these in a row in 2023 when the new game is about to come out. But if I had been playing that in 2013, I believe, when it came out, and I was like, "Wow, they made Alan Wake 2," and it was that, I'd be like, "That what the fuck?"
I mean, and what that was the last Alan Wake game to come out. Yeah. A little side thing that, you know, um, but I guess at that point they must have had faith that they were gonna make a sequel at some point because if they were like, oh, there's no way this is happening, they probably would have tried to write some really hasty conclusion to everything. And I mean, there are games that have their conclusion in like the extra DLC pack. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's totally games that came out where it's like, oh, if you want like the ending because this game didn't really get a sequel, you can buy like the $5 DLC.
Hmm.
And then I already talked about like there's not much the DLC for the base game is just more Alan Wake one stuff, and I like Barry,
Yeah,
of course.
it's
Not
just
much to say
more.
about
It's just
that.
like an epilogue, basically.
I think there was some game design stuff that they played around with that I remember
I like
enjoying.
when you're in the thing that's going on a loop, and it's like simulating different rooms from the main game.
I think 10 years from now, that's probably what I'm going to remember about that. Like
Yeah,
that will be the only thing I remember
that's
about
already
that
mostly what I
DLC.
remember.
Yeah. So I do want to one last thing that I want to bring up about Alan Wake 2, which I touched on a little bit, which is Alan Wake, Alan Woke. And I want to talk about it because we did talk about um Gamergate and crazy right wingers and stuff in our Last of Us 2 episode. So I just because now are you basically familiar with the current culture war battles that are being fought on internet whenever a new game comes out?
Unfortunately, yes,
Do you know what Sweet Baby Inc is?
yes,
Have you been forced to learn what that is?
yes. I've been forced to learn. Did they work on this game?
They're like a consultant thing, and yeah, there's like
I know what they are.
they're it's like a credit. They have a credit on this game,
Wow.
which the most psychotic people on the internet were just mad. Oh, there's like a black woman in the game, But I did think it was interesting that before anyone knew about that, there's arguably explicit themes about this black woman kind of, getting her own voice and everything. People were already yelling about it. I just think it's interesting. Alan Wake 2 mostly escaped a lot of that drama because, to be honest, it wasn't a massive hit.
It wasn't a massive hit, but also like the themes were not explicit enough. And Alan Wake is not a popular enough character for like people to be like, they have denigrated another one of our great cultural heroes. Alan Wake.
It's also the game's also generally has a good reputation, which of course a lot of these psychos, they wanna go to Star Wars Outlaws. It's like, let's pick on the mediocre games and say they're bad because of it's just, I do think that the kind of shape has changed because now it does seem to be like, if there's just like a woman who doesn't have her tits out, that is worth causing like a stir. Like the 10 years ago, there was more of this pretending to care about things, and it seems like it's gotten just those types of people have stopped pretending it's about anything other than not having every character be like a sexy lady.
Yeah, I remember that discourse around it, but I also remember it like dying immediately when the game came out because no one gave a shit.
Yeah.
Alan Woke. Alan Woke was used mostly as a gag instead of anyone actually calling it that. Though I'm sure you can find some YouTube video with 100 views that does that.
Oh yeah. I only thought it was noteworthy in the sense that the fucking cancer that this has morphed, the conversation has like morphed into, it like, it had like a tendril around Alan Wake 2, but then kind of let go because it just didn't fit well enough to make a whole narrative around that, about games hating white men or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
But that's all I want to say about that. I try it. I wish I could lobotomize myself to unlearn like things posted on new Twitter.
Yeah. There is something to be said about like the degree of making like a woke whatever game that's like still fascinated with Norse mythology to the point where I almost wonder how much of it is Sam Lake trying to prove that there's nothing weird about his Norse mythology thing.
Yeah. I mean that
because that's been a thing since the first. And like a black woman character whose powers explicitly come, or at least her grandfather and great uncle come from like being related to Norse gods, or to a degree being related to like Norse mythological ideas.
and it is worth noting because some people were bitching about apparently there is a small section at the end of Quantum Break. Yeah, fuck. Quantum Leap's
the TV show from the 90s. Yes,
that has that clip on YouTube.
No, move on.
But it has like a thing where you technically see like Alex Casey and Saga Anderson, but it's a different actor and she's white. But that didn't really matter because it wasn't even like super tight.
Because they don't own it, so it's not officially part of.
Yeah,
that is interesting. I'd never heard that,
but it is. I just think it's interesting. Like, okay, but it was a choice that they made on purpose to exploit. Like you said, it just kind of further proves the point. It's like it was a very specific thing that they wanted to zone in on. And and to put even more conjecture in there, Sweet Baby Inc. is supposed to be like consulting, so maybe they were helping like Finnish people write a Black American character, for all we know. You know, that could have been part of it, but that's also complete
Yeah,
conjecture.
maybe. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, that is. I did not know that about the ending of Quantum. I never played Quantum
It's
Break.
such like
That's fascinating.
a little like you know, you only bring that up. It's like Saga used to be white if you're trying to be stupid. Um, but yeah, it is like a weird thing because that's like probably forever, and you know that was a Xbox One exclusive Microsoft
Yeah. I mean, I
venture.
know that's like the one that was sort of written to be part of this continuity that they then had to be like, nah, it really wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they got Sean Ashmore back for this game as the sheriff.
I
He's the main
suppose
guy in Quantum
I
Break.
suppose we'll probably need to play
They got the
Quantum
actor
Break
back.
at some point.
Yeah, because that does arguably, I mean, because this game also, that's where they start their experimenting with live action, right?
Oh yeah, because they had a
That they,
tie-in TV show, like a straight.
that I think you just can play during the game, I
I don't
think.
actually know, but I know it's like basically a full-on TV show, from what I understand.
Yeah. And that's like where they started to work with this stuff, which they also do here. There are tons of cutscenes that are live action in this
But
game.
notably, it seems like they were done on the cheap compared to the Microsoft. You know,
Quantum
yeah,
Break.
which
Yeah, because Quantum Break, the reason they don't own it is because they got backing from Microsoft and got so much more money.
yeah, and like I mean, that's another thing I love about like, especially like the last scene, like with Saga and Alan like it looks cheap and grungy in like a way that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So the TV shows do play just during the game
Okay,
in Quantum Break.
yeah, I mean, I want to be a fucking Remedy completist now. I might as well.
Yeah. I do not have an Xbox.
It's on PC. It's on
Oh,
PC.
it's on PC. Okay,
Yeah,
then I'll play it on PC.
yeah. It was an Xbox One exclusive.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe an alternate universe where, well, Microsoft seems to have made lots of mistakes with like buying studios and think, this is what will make our console more appealing, and then they release Starfield, and you know, like,
Yeah.
all right. I think I've run out of things to say.
Okay, I have one last thing to say about this game, actually. And the thing that's really important to understand about the game is that it's not a loop; it's a spiral. Now, do you want to introduce the podcast?
This is like a script. It's not a game script. It's a script.
Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars! Fuck you!
Because the most subtle nuances of emotions could be seen on screen. With the PlayStation 4, games have now finally reached that stage.
Yes, this is the Citizen Game Podcast, where you talk about games, trying to be movies, still trying to be TV, kinda, with this one.